Well, welcome to our webinar. I think I got everything started. Sorry for the clunky beginning. I'm still figuring things out. You have joined ConnectStrat for a little conversation around life and legacy planning. I should have said little, for a great big conversation around life and legacy planning. Before I introduce our speaker today, I just want to introduce ConnectStrat, tell you a bit about us, who we are. We are strategic coaches who focus on EOS, but also life and legacy planning and strategic coaching, primarily focused on the IT service provider community. My name's Jameson West. Been around the channel for my entire professional career. I own an MSP for 21 years, acquired a few others before I sold, and I'm now the CEO of both TimeZest and Smileback. Brett, you want to talk for a moment, introduce yourself?
My landscaper has just showed up with perfect timing, so apologize for any noise in the background. But yeah, my name is Brett Jaffe. I'm also a strategic coach with ConnectStrat. I've run an MSP for over 20 years that I built and sold along with a couple other service-related firms. One was an electronic discovery company, one was a digital forensics company, and one was a cloud organization. On top of ConnectStrat, I'm also CEO of Audit, and I work with some peer group facilitation as well.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, my name is Jason Knight. I'm a professional EOS implementer. I've been an IT services entrepreneur for about almost 30 years now, I hate to say. But after selling my company, I started in 2005, sold in 2014, and now work with other MSPs and IT service companies, helping them get the most out of their business using EOS.
Thanks, Jason. Fred.
Hi, I'm Fred Jensen, and I'm a strategic coach with ConnectStrat. I'm also a professional EOS implementer and a certified life plan facilitator. And I spent about 27 years as a sales and marketing leader in the IT industry, and then started my own consulting business.
Thanks, Fred. So it is my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Arlin Sorensen. I've known Arlin since 2006. Arlin, I met him at the same day I met Harry Brailsford and Arnie from ConnectWise, everybody at an event called SMB Nation up in Seattle, and immediately was drawn to what he was doing with his peer groups. And I was a member of HTG, his peer groups he founded for 12 years, and just really learned a lot about what he's brought to the community. I don't have to introduce him, really. Everybody knows who he is, super famous guy. And just really appreciative of you taking your time, Arlin, to share with our audience why life and legacy planning are so critical. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and ask you to share your screen and take the show.
All right, we'll get this started up here. Should be able to see that now, hopefully.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, Jameson and the ConnectStrat team. It's really good to be with you today, talking about something that's really a passion of mine, which is planning, but particularly legacy and life planning. And I want to start just by talking about the way we think about planning. And the legacy plan is really the foundational plan that I believe is important for every person to have. It's the lifetime plan. It's where you're trying to go in both your personal life and your business. And out of that then can flow the life plan, the business plan, the leadership plan, and the things you're going to do every year to move toward that legacy. But legacy is the foundation. And the reality is there's a direct connection between a legacy plan and a life plan. They're not two distinct plans. They're very closely connected. One of the misconceptions, I think, is that people don't recognize the fact that everybody's going to leave a legacy. It's really not optional. It happens whether you intend it to or not. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of legacy do I want to leave? And that's really what should drive your planning. There are some key considerations to keep in mind as you think about legacy. Legacy is really what happens after you leave something. Doesn't mean you're going to die, but legacy happens as you leave certain things. It's always forward-looking. The life plan, however, is about what happens today. It's about what happens while you live. And it really is about the 168 hours that every one of us is given every week. That's the greatest gift we actually have is time. And every person on this planet gets exactly the same amount every week, 168 hours. And a life plan is all about what you do with those 168 hours. So there is a direct connection between the two, and this is the connection. Legacy doesn't happen after we're no longer here. It's built while we live. So what we do now determines the future. In other words, life determines what our legacy will be. You know, the way I like to always think about it is, if I want to be remembered by my family as a caring, strong leader, you know, with a happy legacy outcome, I don't want to wait until I'm 85 sitting on the rocking chair and having mistreated people for the last 85 years and all of a sudden snap my fingers and think I'm going to have the legacy I want. We create legacy every day by the way we live, but the key is to have a vision for where we're going to go. So there's really 6 questions that I think is really important for us to answer when we think about legacy in life. The first one is, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people that we're trying to impact? And to really identify those clearly. We can't impact everybody equally. So who are the key folks on our journey that we want to impact? Next is the what question. And life and legacy planning is a journey. It's not something you sit down, you write out, and you're done. It constantly changes, it constantly moves, and we constantly have to be asking ourselves, what's next? So we're taking the appropriate steps. When are we going to do it? We have to create a rhythm to make sure that we're keeping things current, that we're taking regular steps toward what we're trying to accomplish. Where are we going? That's what vision's all about, painting a picture of the future. And that's where legacy is so important. What is that outcome we're trying to reach toward so that we can get there and accomplish the legacy we want to leave behind? The how is related to our core values. That defines how we're going to live. I think about core values as the guardrails on the road of life. As long as we stay within those guardrails, we're going to get to our destination. And finally, the why, our purpose, the mission we're on. What is it that drives us? If we can answer those 6 questions, we've got the ability to sit down and create a legacy plan. We think about legacy in 2 ways. We all have a personal legacy, and if you're a business owner, you're also going to have a business legacy. They're 2 distinct plans. You have to treat them separately, but they're certainly very much combined at the same time. But there's a plan for your personal life and for your legacy, for your business. And within each of those, there's really 2 different components. There are a lot of tactical things that you need to accomplish in your personal and business legacy, and we'll talk about that in a little bit in detail. But there are just some things you need to get done. When I think about legacy where it hasn't gone as people might have expected, it's when unexpected things happen. We've had members of our peer group organization that have met an untimely death and didn't necessarily have all the tactical pieces in place, which left their business and their family in a state of uncertainty and chaos. There are just some things you need to get done to create a legacy that will last the way you want it to. But the bigger thing to really be thinking about is, what's the impact you're trying to create? You know, one of the things about legacy is that it lasts a very long time. And you can create legacy that goes far beyond your death and into generations of the future. It's important for that to happen, though, for us to plan for it. It won't just happen automatically. Which brings us to the reality that there's two ways legacy gets created. Accidentally, or I recommend being very intentional about it. If you do nothing, the government will step in and they'll define your legacy for you after they take a bunch of things along the way. You can creatively make a legacy that is exactly what you want by going through a series of planning and really being disciplined about updating and continuing to keep that journey current as you go through life. But don't allow it to just happen to you. When we look at a personal legacy, there are a lot of components that you really need to think through. And the way I always encourage people to think about legacy, it's like trying to eat an elephant. You have to do it one bite at a time. This is a journey you're going to be on as long as you're breathing. And you need to look at it that way. Start with the things that are most important, which often are some of the legal documents that you need to think through. But over time, you want to work through these different components. And when we break them down into more detail, and I know you can't see this necessarily, but there are lots and lots of considerations to think through. Not everyone will apply in every case, but there are dozens of things that you should consider as you're working out your personal legacy plan. And over time, you can work through these things and make sure that you've thought through and considered every different aspect. You can boil that down with just some simple documents that write down key things that you're trying to accomplish. And this fits into the mindset of rocks in an EOS situation. You know, what are the things you're trying to accomplish right now? What are the strategies you want to employ? Make sure they align to your values and your mission, but know how to take the next steps and just continually walk that journey. The same thing, or before I get to that, I love this quote from Francis Chan. Our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. We trade our 168 hours for a lot of different things. We need to make sure that we're trading them for things that really matter. And that's defined by the things that we really want to build a legacy toward. When we think about a business legacy, we have the same kind of canvas that allows us to consider all types of different areas. Some are consistent with the personal plan, but most are very different. And it's something you have to work through not only with yourself. You shouldn't create a personal legacy plan all by yourself. It should include the stakeholders of that, which is typically going to be your family. In your business, same thing is true. You need to create the plan with the stakeholders of your business. And there are a number of areas of consideration to keep in mind about your business legacy. Again, not everyone will apply to you, but it gives you a roadmap for what you're trying to accomplish and what you want to leave behind when your time is over with that company. As part of it, money is always one of the things that people think of right away. And there are two key numbers that I think every business owner needs to have. Individually, we all need to know our personal wealth target. That's defined as the number of dollars we want to accumulate before we're no longer earning again. In other words, what are we going to have for our retirement? How much money do we need to set aside so when we get to the end of our working career, we can live the lifestyle we want to live after we're no longer earning a paycheck? That can include all sorts of sources of funds, but we need to know what that number is. Now, it's not a hard and fast number for any of us. When we talk to financial advisors, they have recommended a target somewhere between 25 and 40x whatever we live on currently. So if you're living on a salary today of $100,000 a year, if that's what you're spending annually to maintain your lifestyle, that personal wealth target ought to be somewhere between $2.5 and $4 million. And with normal economic conditions, which we certainly don't have today, but when we return to that, under normal economic conditions, that should enable you to maintain the kind of lifestyle you've had and get to the end without running short. You need to spend time with a financial advisor and come up with that number, and then work toward, as part of your legacy plan, building toward that. For those that own a business, they usually are betting on their business to fund their personal wealth target. They're trading a majority of their hours to build a company that they believe will bring wealth to them in the future. The number one fallacy of running a business is that hard work will someday translate into value. That is not the case. People don't buy hard work. People buy companies that have true value, the ability to earn regular profit that can be used over time to continue to grow and fund a personal wealth target. So you've got to have a business plan that will also provide that support. But you need to know what the number is you're trying to build within your company if that's a key part of your personal wealth strategy. Many of the businesses that we work with don't know what that number is. And when they begin to talk about it as a company, they fail to recognize that the government's going to take a big chunk of that. There are other things that are going to eat into that, and it usually takes a much bigger pile of dollars than people realize to get to the targets they have. So financials are a piece of both a personal and a business legacy plan, but they require us to really plan early, because it takes time to build value in a company, and it certainly takes time to accumulate what we're going to need for retirement. The days of waiting until you get to retirement and hoping the government will take care of you are quickly going to come to an end. And certainly after spending $6 trillion or so on this current situation, that's going to shorten the timeline as well. So take the time to make sure you know what your plans are around the accounting and financial side of your legacy plan. The key to really unlocking the power of a plan, though, is to recognize the connections between these things. So a life plan is really a one-year step toward the legacy plan. How you live your life this year should move you one step closer to achieving the goals of your legacy plan. As long as you know where you're trying to go from a legacy perspective, you can break that down into bite-sized chunks, create yearly goals that you can break down into quarterly actions to move you toward that legacy. That's the critical component here. They are completely intertwined. They work together. You shouldn't have a legacy going one way and live a life going a different way. That won't connect in the end. So we have to tie these things together. The same is true with our business legacy. A business plan is a one-year slice toward achieving our business legacy. And if we do it right by living out our business plan every year and following our life plan every year, we're going to move toward and finally achieve the vision we have for our business and our personal life from a legacy perspective. It's all about taking bite-sized chunks, creating quarterly goals, and being accountable to achieve those over and over again on our journey toward life and legacy. It's critical that we have that plan and that we follow it. So from a life plan perspective, again, it's not really that critical that you use any kind of particular format or anything like that. It's just a matter of knowing where you want to accomplish this year, writing those goals down, what are the action steps you need to take, and then monitoring those things so you can continue to move toward them. It's not rocket science. Legacy is created through having a plan and then executing that plan every year through a life or a business plan. And if you do that, you can achieve your goals. I sat down with a couple a few years ago, and they had heard me speak about life and legacy planning at a meeting, and they asked if they could go to dinner, and I said, sure. We went and talked about it, and they were in their 30s, upper 30s, and admitted they really hadn't even thought about it before. You know, are we too young to have a legacy plan? And my answer is absolutely not. You need to have a legacy plan because it's going to take a lifetime to get there. We met that night. They agreed to go home and begin the conversation. I got a phone call about 6 weeks later that the husband working out, and this guy was in shape. He worked out every day, but in the locker room at the gym, he had had a heart attack and lost his life. We don't know how much time we have for these kind of things. But what we do know is we're going to leave a legacy. And what's important is that we plan for it. We have to plan for the unexpected as some part of that, which is where all the tactical documents come in. You need to have a will. You need to have power of attorney documents. You need to have healthcare directives. You need to, if you have kids, you need to have that all figured out. There's a lot of tactical things that are really important, especially on the business side. I've been called into numerous business situations where no one in the company other than the owner had signing authority to do checks. Just recently, a member of one of our peer groups had an issue where the owner went into the hospital, and with COVID, you couldn't go ask them to sign a check. They had to find a nurse that could carry a check to the patient's room and ask the owner to sign the check so they could continue business while he was out of commission. Those are the kinds of discussions that come up when you really do a legacy plan. How are you preparing for the unexpected? These things take time. They're work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But they are so, so important, and they will do you so well if you really put the effort into it and then use it. The biggest value of a life plan is it gives you reason to say no to things. There are so many good things that come at us every day, but we have to learn to say no. And when we have a life plan in place that's tied to our vision for a legacy, if it's not on the plan, we have to say no. And if it's something that's that important, then we have to adjust our plan and put it into the plan. But I've done that for a number of years, is use my life plan as an excuse when people come and ask me to do certain things, which were good, to say it's not in my plan this year. My time is committed to doing certain things. I've only got 168 hours in a week. I've got to make sure that I use them on the things that I deem most important. The life plan is a critical component for you doing that. So I can't encourage you enough to spend the time, to do the work, to have the conversations, some of which aren't easy, but to make sure that you're putting in place the pieces that will enable you to create the legacy that you want to leave. The one thing I know for sure is if you don't change anything, nothing will change. You have to take action. It's so critical that you do the work, that you keep current, and that you walk the path so that you can achieve what you want to do. My favorite quote of all time is from Thomas Edison, and that is that vision without execution is hallucination. There's a lot of people that go through life hallucinating about what the future will be. We have to stop and execute. We have to take the time, have the hard conversations, and do the things that are going to enable us to really make an impact, not only for ourselves, but for all the people around us that we care about. Legacy is not about us. Legacy is about those we care about. And it can be things that can last for generations into the future if we do it right. If we don't, people will be thinking about us in a very different way. When my dad passed away, we had gone through all these legacy planning processes, and it was a very simple process for us and enabled us to really mourn and celebrate his life. It wasn't more than a year later that my father-in-law passed, and we had had those same conversations, and he always told me the same exact answer. It's not going to be my problem. He didn't really want to address it. He didn't want to have that conversation. And I can tell you that when he passed, I spent most all of a full week in his office trying to figure out what assets they had, what was going on. And it was really unfortunate because I couldn't really spend time celebrating the life that he had lived. I was too busy being consumed by trying to figure out how to prepare to take care of his wife going forward. Legacy is the greatest gift you can give to the people you care about. But you've got to not hallucinate about it. You've got to take action. You've got to build a plan and continually work that plan. So that's my encouragement to you. Start down the journey, take a bite, and continue to eat that elephant. Because if you do, it will be something that the people you care about will remember about you forever. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Jameson. If I can figure out how to do this. There we go.
Jameson, you're muted.
I will do my best to repeat myself there. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jason, or Fred, whoever said that. So thank you, Arlin. That was wonderful. We have several questions that have come in. I just wanted to let those who are watching know we're using a platform that allows us to kind of capture the conversation and questions. We use this when we consult to be collaborative. And for those of you who leverage EOS, which we all do, we kind of use it as an IDS form. So we have a question, we can discuss it, and Brett will be our scribe today. So I may bring some folks off, may bring some folks in, Arlin, to ask questions live. A couple of these are our questions. If you wouldn't mind, Brett, I'm going to start with that top one and ask it. We can discuss that one. Arlin, I sold my business. I've had this question asked of me multiple times, which is, I really struggled with that concept of legacy because you were teaching me about legacy when I was in HTG, and I think I'd known you and you'd mentored me for all of 11 years or so before I sold. And I really struggled with the concept of legacy when I was selling what I thought I'd been building as a legacy for 21 years. I owned that business and sold it. So brand, culture, everything I thought that was part of me is, I couldn't feel today more disconnected from what I built. So can you help me and those listening understand, like, how do I attach my legacy to what I spent the majority of my professional life building?
Well, that's a great question, Jameson, and it is kind of a conundrum that we have to deal with as business entrepreneurs and owners. You have to really think about business legacy, I think, in a couple of different spheres. One of those is that, you know, we are creating legacy while we run that company. Okay, legacy isn't about necessarily something that happens when we die or sell the company. We create legacy while we run that business, right? So you're pouring into the people that work for you. You're building relationships with the clients that you serve. You're connecting with your suppliers and other folks. And through all that interaction, you're making an impact. So the legacy is being built while you run that organization. one of the facts that I teach about when I do M&A training is that once you sign the deal and sell the company, you no longer have control, right?
That's right.
But I can tell you that there are things in your company that remain in the people that were part of it, even after it's been bought and somebody else's culture and brand is on top of it, right? So we can't think about it in terms of keeping the business exactly the way it was, because that's not what happens when it gets acquired. But the impact we've had in the individuals that we've worked with and the companies we've supported, that continues on. And that legacy flows through them and touches others. And so it's a little different, but it's kind of the same as our personal legacy. You know, we pour into our family and into close friends and things like that. And, you know, we don't control those things, but it impacts their lives and it makes a difference. So we kind of have to be willing to let go of some of the critical things that were important to us as a leader. Now, as part of M&A, I also encourage people to create a non-negotiable list, which is things that they want to make sure are true when a deal is completed. And a part of that can address some of the legacy items we have on our legacy plan. We just have to make sure that the acquirer will agree to those things as part of the contract and build it in. So it can be done at some level, but again, at the end of the day, once you sell the company, you certainly lose the direct ability to control what that immediate legacy looks like. It doesn't erase the past legacy building, but it may change what that company looks like going forward.
Great, thank you. We have an attendee, Sheila Bixler, who has a question. Sheila, I think you've unmuted and you're on. Would you like to please ask Arlin your question?
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, good. I've been having some troubles with my camera and microphone and waiting for a new one to arrive from Best Buy. Should be here any minute. So yeah, I'm listening to you, Arlin, and I have to tell you, as a side note, I went to LinkedIn and looked at your profile, and I'm really intrigued and impressed with your background, the variety of things that you have done and do. So it's extra meaningful to hear your suggestions today.
Well, thank you.
Truthfully, we're in our mid-50s. We have an MSP. We're at the 10-year mark. We're feeling pretty burned out. And I'm inspired and also daunted by what you're suggesting here. And this is much how I feel when I think about, say, being an HTG or Taylor Business Group. I'm really stuck. And yet I fully believe in what you're saying from a personal and business perspective. So I'm wondering if you could offer me and perhaps someone else who's feeling a little daunted by this, some bite-sized first steps.
Sure. And that's a good learning right there. You got to take it in bite-sized steps because it is completely overwhelming if you don't. The first thing I'd encourage you to do is get involved in a peer group. Surrounding yourself with peers that are on the same journey is really helpful. It just is encouraging to know that you're not alone, which I know you already know, but you know, it just feels good to be surrounded by a group of people that are doing the same things in the same way. So that's a great place to start. You know, a second thing that I think is significantly helpful as you're working through legacy and life and business planning is really consider a coach. You know, a lot of people avoid getting a coach because number one, they don't want to make the commitment of time, which is important, or money. But I can tell you from my own experience that coaches play a significant role in helping us go faster. It's not that you can't do these things on your own, but when you've got somebody that's helping guide you or ask the right questions at the right time, when you are tired, when you feel like you're overwhelmed, you can still keep moving forward if you've got somebody there to kind of walk with you. So that's a couple of kind of foundational things. From dealing with legacy directly and head on, I always recommend people start with the tactical things first. And that usually starts with the legal kinds of documents. Make sure that you've got the key legal documents in place. So if something unexpected happens, which it does to some people, you aren't leaving those either in your family or business partners or key staff trying to make things work without having the right foundational things in place. So on the personal side, that means having your will up to date, having a power of attorney document in place that enables somebody to take action on your behalf, having healthcare directives in place so that if, heaven forbid, there has to be a decision made, there's authority given there. If you've got kids, who's going to be the caretaker of those kids if you cannot fulfill that responsibility? Those are, to me, like table stakes for legacy that just need to be done up front. On the business side, it's the same kind of things. It's do you have a buy-sell agreement in place with your partner if you've got other owners in the company? Do you have powers of attorney in place to enable somebody in the company to make, decisions on its behalf if you can't do it? So there are some key tactical foundational legacy legal things that you want to have in place just to make sure that things can happen in the event the unexpected happens. And from there, then it becomes a matter of just taking things one step at a time. I tell people when they start on creating their legacy plan, you better figure out a 2-year journey at least to really work through all the things you need to think about and talk about. It is a process. You're never done. So once you get through the initial kind of working through the different areas, you gotta review and keep them fresh because life changes. Things change constantly. So, it can happen. It's one of those things you tackle one thing at a time and just keep working on it. But writing it down is critical. A lot of people tell me, well, I have a plan. It's up here. I can tell you the up here doesn't work if nobody else, if you're not alive to tell somebody what's up there. Get it written down. Do it with the right kind of counsel. So use an attorney to help you. Don't go online and find some free document you can download and hope it works in your state. A lot of state by state differences here. Do it well, and it will be the greatest gift you can give to the people that you care about. And I do understand the burnout part. I ran HTS for 27 years. I was at the burnout stage when I exited that business. It happens to all of us. But I can tell you, peers are what got me to 27 years.
Very helpful. Thank you. We are in a peer group, but it's a more casual one than some of the more formal ones, precisely because we are overwhelmed and don't think we could put the required energy and whatnot into the more formalized ones. And I recognize the irony of that. If we put the energy into the more formalized ones, we would get something out of it. And in even more ironic true confessions here, I am a coach, so I know about that process and how important that is. And you know how that goes.
I do know how that goes.
Hard to apply it to yourself sometimes, but
yes, it is.
I really appreciate the nudge and the focus on start with the tactical. We've got all the personal elements of that in place, but we definitely need to work on the business related ones. And a 2-year plan is easier to think about than a life legacy or a business life plan. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Brett, is that yours?
That's one that's come up a few times that I've heard from other clients as well, is how aligned should your team be? If you're the business owner, how aligned should you bring people in around your personal legacy goals? So I've talked to business owners who have exit strategies and things that they want to accomplish. How much should you involve your team in that process?
Well, that's a really good question, and I don't know that there's a right answer. I have an opinion. You know, this kind of, it gets down to the way that you want to run your company. And where this usually comes up for me in the first place is, am I going to be an open book company and actually let my team know how we're doing financially, or am I going to hold that close to the chest and just expect them to come and work hard every day? I always was a believer and am a believer in open book management. I think transparency is the way that you build loyalty. It's the way that you help people buy into what you're trying to accomplish. It requires you to educate, right? My experience around this is that your team, unless you educate them, believes that you are already making far more money than you're making. Every dollar that flows into the company is going straight into your checkbook. We have to educate. And I know when we made the transition to open book at HTS, we spent over 18 months every month educating our team on another aspect of financial management, which paid huge dividends because they then could help our clients even talk about those things more openly. So I think it's a philosophy kind of thing. If you are of that mindset, then I think sharing your personal goals, I personally shared my personal life plan with my team. I wanted them to know what I was going to spend my 168 hours on every week. And I didn't want them to wonder why I was doing certain things as part of how I use my time. You know, why was I going and watching my kids' games in the middle of the afternoon? Because it was on my legacy, my life plan. I wanted to be there for them, you know, and so to me, it just opens the door for conversation. So I think it, you know, it has to be done in context and how you're going to run your organization. But if you're a transparent leader, which is what I would recommend, then I believe that sharing openly what you're trying to accomplish from a personal perspective is a good plan.
It's great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlin. A couple of the coaches had some questions as well. Who would like to jump in? I think Fred, you had a question in there.
Yeah, sure. As you were starting to discuss in your presentation, Arlin, a lot of the things you talked about were the unexpected and things that take control away from us. Can you flip that a little bit and talk about, okay, when we have control, how do you discover what you're trying to build? How do you discover how does the process help you to discover the inspirational things of your vision?
Well, I think the key part of discovery really is to get outside of ourselves. You know, to actually spend time having the conversations with the people that our life or legacy plan are going to impact. One of the mistakes I see happen a lot of times around planning in general is that somebody goes off by themselves and writes a plan. You know, I see this a lot with business plans. An owner will go off and write a plan. They come back, they reveal the plan to the organization, and they wonder why their team's not excited. And you know, the reason is they weren't part of the plan building. They didn't have any input. And that's how I want to think about legacy planning. The legacy plan we're building is not for our own benefit. We're not going to be here. The legacy plan is about the people that we care about. In our business, it's about the team that we care about. And so we need to involve them in the process. So part of the visioning process needs to be to have those open conversations with people. You know, we need to look internally at the things that are important to us. Vision to me is, what's our purpose going to be lived out? What's that look like in the future? If we live out our purpose intentionally, what will the outcome look like? And then we build toward that. So it's a matter really of spending a lot of time reflecting internally, having conversations externally. It's not the kind of thing you sit down and whip out in 15 or 30 minutes. I mean, it should take you a period of time to really do the kind of hard work of looking for it, seeking that guidance. You know, if you've got a faith relationship, that certainly plays into it as well. But we take all that input and we really try to then paint a picture of what we're trying to build, what we're trying to accomplish. And then we can bring others into helping support us along that journey. Just because you write a plan doesn't mean you can execute it. We need to be encouraged and supported. We need to be held accountable. That's one of the reasons I always shared my life plan with my team in the business. I wanted them to help hold me accountable. And I can tell you they enjoyed it when they got that opportunity. There's nothing employees would rather do than point out when the boss isn't doing what he said he was going to do. So we can, you know, you can figure this out with some effort, but it does take effort. It takes determination to get it done, and you won't get it exactly right the first time. That's one of the things I hear from people all the time. Well, I don't know that I'm going to get it right. Well, I can tell you not doing anything is getting it wrong. So take a stab at it, come back, review it, talk about it, and continue to refine it. I wrote my first legacy plan almost 20 years ago now, and I've revised it probably 50 times in the last 20 years. It's never done. Life changes things, but that doesn't mean we don't start down the road and continue to get better and better as we go.
Thank you. Some other questions. Brett, I think you had, or I had another one over there I'd like to ask about. You know, in terms of a business, this is a little more tactical. It's the documents one, Brett. I think I do, and I talk to a lot of business owners who seem to like have a lot of organization with their legal documents and everything. The right people have access. I've had this question asked to me, and I personally thought about it. I was making notes when you were talking about it, like, wow, if something happens to my wife and I, and my documents are, we've got everything. They're all digital in OneDrive that nobody else has the password to. Like how,
Exactly.
I've been thinking, like, not only do you have to get this all done, but you have to make sure that the right stuff's in the right people's hands. And I'm sure you've run into the same problem. You talked about your father-in-law, and probably weren't any documents, but those that were there were unlikely shared with anybody. What do you recommend? How do people think through this stuff?
Well, the whole digital era has certainly created some challenges when it comes to managing legacy. You know, certainly tools like LastPass or different kinds of passwords management systems can be set up in a way that's appropriate, and you need to take those steps to enable. It's a nightmare to try to work through accessing credit card information, bank accounts, other things if you don't have the appropriate information. You know, in some cases it's almost impossible. So, you know, you've got to come up with a strategy. What I settled on is pretty simple, and, you know, being a simple Iowa farm boy, the simple is always my first approach. I do a USB drive for my kids. I update it once a quarter, and I give them that, tell them to put it away and never pull it out if I'm alive. But if I'm gone, this is where you need to go to get key pieces of information that you need. So you just got to figure out a strategy that'll work for you, and have that available. The other side of digital is social. You create a footprint. I don't know how many dead friends you have on Facebook, but they're out there. And it is very difficult to remove a footprint on social media. but there are ways to get it done. And but it's something to be thinking about as part of the legacy planning. Is someday somebody's going to have to undo all the things you've done, and how are you going to enable them to be able to do that? So great question. And it becomes more complicated every day because we have less and less paper that we could even file somewhere to make it easy for folks.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The LinkedIn profile, Facebook profile. I do have a lot of folks
You
out there I
have
know who
dozens.
passed.
Yep.
People still think they're alive. They're wishing them happy birthday.
Yep.
And then sometimes you can tell some relative had access and made a final post and eventually shut it down. And boy, the gracefulness with which that happens is night and day. That's interesting. All right, we had another question here. Oh, this was mine as well. Hey, I had a lot of questions. You talked about personal wealth target. I love that concept. And so, and then Brett had asked a question about sharing personal wealth target and business target with your employees. So I was super transparent with my business target, but I wasn't quite as transparent with my personal wealth target. I kind of separated, but very clear on what I expected out of the business and knew the goals. And so that's interesting. My question around that business or personal wealth target is, it's one thing to say, I need X dollars in the bank after taxes so I could live off that money going forward. But I have like a long-term asset that's not, or a non-liquid asset, or I may have a couple annuities. I guess it's likely just working with a wealth manager or a financial advisor, but how do you pull all that together and try to make sense out of it? I've always struggled with the idea of this consolidated number because it didn't factor in all these. It gets complicated for a lot of business owners, especially.
Yep. Yeah, it is complicated, number one, for sure. And I would definitely work with a good financial advisor or planner to help you with it. You know, it really comes down to, you can include everything in the number as long as it can be turned into cash if it's needed, right? That's really what you're trying to get to, is do you have the ability to create adequate cash, whether it's invested in real estate or whatever the assets might be. Can they be converted to cash in the event you need them? You know, and for most things it can happen. So, you know, there may be certain kinds of investments that are difficult to transition into cash, especially in the short term. But this is where you just want to spend the time with a good financial planner. And he may have a little different number than we have. We kind of got a broad number. I just know that most people haven't planned adequately for the future. And certainly at my age, there is still a little Social Security flowing. For some younger folks, that may not be the case. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be planning on that. I think we all need to take responsibility and do what we can to be prepared. But you know, it's really your net worth number, as long as it is something you can convert to cash.
Okay. Brett, Fred, Jason, anybody else have questions for Arlin?
No, I think he's done a great job of covering a pretty broad topic there.
Absolutely. Arlin, any final? We did perfect on time. We're 53 minutes in. Did you have any final thoughts or anything you'd like to add to kind of wrap things up?
You know, I know I've said it probably multiple times in this webinar. Legacy is the greatest gift you can give to the people you care about, right? It really is a gift. You're not going to necessarily be here. Well, you won't be here to watch most of it happen. The thing about legacy is some of it you'll get to observe as you build it, but the real impact happens when you're no longer either leading your company or alive. And so it's all about the people that you care about. And you need to really think through that and think about ways you can make their future what you hope it can be. There's lots of vehicles out there that you can use to actually span generations into the future. But it takes planning and preparation. It takes spending the time, doing the work, but it is a gift that can give for generations to come. So I can't encourage you enough not to hallucinate about it, not to just think about it, but to take action, put your vision into action and execute it.
Thank you so much, Arlin. Really appreciate it. Intentionality just came through super clear today. So I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who joined us. This was streaming live on Facebook, so it'll be there indefinitely. I will also post it on the ConnectStrat resources page so that it's there for folks to consume. Not everybody could be here live. If you are thinking about life planning and legacy work, and if you're working on your business in terms of vision, strategy, and execution, that's what we're here to help you with at ConnectStrat. Arlin's been a huge influence, particularly around the life and legacy portion. I've learned a lot from him, an incredible amount from our last 12 years, and Fred's been very close with him as well on the life and legacy side. So we have resources there to help you. If we could be of any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks all for your time. Thank you for joining. And Arlin, thank you again.
Thank
Alan,
you.
thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Arlen.